everyone, today I'm going to be decluttering some of my eyeshadow palettes because I've been going through my eyeshadow palettes and trying to declutter the eyeshadow palettes I don't need. Wow, how many times can I say eyeshadow palettes in one paragraph? Anyways, if you guys want to see what eyeshadow palettes I'm going to be decluttering, just keep watching. So I'm going to be decluttering my JStar Bloodlust palette. It's a beautiful palette, but I just don't reach for it, and honestly don't really use any JStar products anymore because his personality is kind of awful. So I'm going to be decluttering this palette. It's pretty, but I just know that someone else will get more use out of it than I have. I think I've tried it twice, and yeah, it's not for me. It's pretty. I got it simply because it's purple, but I have purple tones elsewhere, and this palette just overall didn't really speak to me too much. I definitely prefer other purple palettes in my collection, so I'm quite fine decluttering it. I mean, the packaging's pretty, but also not my favorite because, like, dust and everything clings to it, so I'm going to be decluttering this palette. The next palette I'm decluttering is the Bay Pastels palette. This palette just is not it for me. For some people, it worked really well, but for me, it did not at all. I absolutely despise this palette. It was so freaking heartbreaking that it didn't work for me, but I've tried it numerous times and it just didn't work for me. I could have easily gotten a dud, but some Beauty Bay products aren't the best. Like, I have some other palettes from them that just aren't it. So I'm gonna be decluttering this. I have tried to use it at least 3 times and it just isn't it. It swatched fine, but I don't know, I guess this really shows that swatches don't dictate how eyeshadows work on the eyes, because for me, this did not work at all. I hated using this palette, and every time I would just wipe my makeup look off because it would literally piss me off. Next, I'm decluttering the Lime Crime Venus Immortalis palette. This palette is beautiful, but it's not a palette that I need. I only like a few shades in this palette. Most of them are patchy and just not that great, so I've decided to declutter this. I have colors in other palettes that I will get more use out of, so that's why I am decluttering this. It's just not the best quality, if I'm being honest. The shade Ash is not great. It takes forever to build up. It has hard pan, like, it's just a mess. I do really love the shade Unveil, Echo, and Hail. Those are my favorite shades in this palette, but honestly, I have so many eyeshadow palettes that I can't hold on to more palettes just because I like 3 shades. I think for the most part I have dupes for these anyways, so I've finally decided to declutter this palette. The packaging's beautiful, but the quality is just not what I had hoped. Surprisingly, I'm decluttering the ABH Amareezy palette. I'm decluttering this because I just don't use it, like, at all. It's a stunning palette, and I was so happy when I got it, but it's just not something I've reached for. I guess the color story isn't really up my alley that much. I also I like ABH eyeshadows, but I prefer other brands more, so I guess that is also why I'm like, don't really need it. That being said, I think that quality is fine. It's just not a palette for me. There's pressed glitters in here. I'm kind of like, there's like lots of neutrals and natural shades, and I'm just not about that. The shimmers are kind of what sold me, but even then, don't really need them, so that's why I'm decluttering this palette. It's beautiful. The packaging kind of made me keep it for longer than I needed because sparkles, but I'm decluttering this and I'm quite fine with doing that. I'm decluttering my Morphe 9L palette. This palette is really pretty, but it's just not a palette that I need. Again, I have so many purple eyeshadows now that this is just not something I need. It's a beautiful palette. I don't even think I've used it, honestly, but it's been in my declutter pile for a while. It's just not something that I need in my collection, and honestly, considering I haven't reached for it, I don't think I am going to reach for it. It's just a palette that I picked up on a whim because it was literally $15, and I don't need it. I have other palettes that I use more, and I prefer the formula. Not that this formula is bad or anything, because it's not, but I prefer other formulas over Morphe. Morphe is still good and affordable, but this palette in itself is just not a color story that I need in my life, hence why I am decluttering it. I just realized that this video is primarily JStar palettes, but Two guesses why. But I'm decluttering the Morphe and Jeffree Star palette. This palette's beautiful, which is why I've kept it in my collection as long as I have. Personally, it's because of the green shades. These two greens just speak to me, but I know I don't need to keep a palette just for two shades. Besides these shades, I haven't even looked at this palette, to be completely honest. Like, this first row is just kind of stupid. Like, what is this? It's like, But besides the fact, okay, Drive-Thru is also a really, really, really pretty shade. So these three shades are why I've been holding on to it. And Vroom Vroom, because I love, like, gray tones like that. But I digress. I'm decluttering this because I don't need it in my collection. The formula's fine. I mean, I've only used, like, 2 eyeshadows from this palette. The formula's fine. It's just not a palette that I need in my collection. I have most of these shades elsewhere. I am going to check and see if I have these shades elsewhere. Because if not, I may end up keeping it for a bit. But I do want to declutter it because I don't reach for it. And at this point, I'm like, if I don't reach for it, I don't need it. For the most part. There are some, like, palettes where I'm going to keep anyways. But for this palette, I think I can declutter it. But I'll let you guys know if I decide not to declutter it just to keep a few shades. But for the most part, this is getting decluttered. I'm also decluttering my Jawbreaker palette. As beautiful as this palette is, I just don't reach for it. I think literally since I've gotten it, I've used it twice, maybe 3 times, and I've had it for a while. So I'm going to declutter this. Like, I love the color story. Don't get me wrong. This color story is beautiful, but I haven't reached for it. And while I do love the color story, I think I have most of these colors in other palettes, so I think I'm fine decluttering it. Like, this is a beautiful palette, and honestly, if I think a palette's beautiful regardless, I'm going to keep it if I like it. Like, just because it's JStar doesn't mean I'm not going to use a palette I've already bought. That being said, considering I haven't reached for this since I bought it, basically, I think I'm quite fine decluttering it. Like, it is such a beautiful palette. It's, like, rainbow but fun, and I mean, the FUCK shade speaks to me, but I think I'm going to declutter it because it's just not something I reach for, and honestly, I don't think I need it in my collection. I think I'll be okay decluttering it. As you guys can probably tell, like, I'm rambling because part of me is like, I don't want to declutter it, but then the other part of me is like, yes, declutter it so you can at least make some money because you need money. But I don't know. I don't think I need this palette, so I think I'm finally getting the courage to declutter it. Like, I love some of these shades, but I think I can find dupes. So, considering I can find dupes, I'm going to declutter this, and I have spoken. A palette that I'm debating being the key phrase, decluttering, is the Alien palette by JStar. I love this palette so much. It's been, like, discontinued, so, like, that's another reason why I've been holding on to it, because I'm like, what if I regret getting rid of it and then I can never get it again? So, like, the packaging's interesting, it's whatever, but the color story is what makes me keep it every time I do a declutter. Like, it's just so pretty. Like, I love the shades in this. Martian Soil is one of my favorites. I love there being cat fur everywhere. Love that for me. Like, even looking at it now, I can't say if I'll declutter this or not yet. Like, it's hard enough decluttering Jawbreaker, but oh god, I'm dying. I'm alive. I love choking on my own spit. That's fun. But I just love the color story. I love the greens. I love Martian Soil. I love the gray tones. Like, I love this palette, and I can't decide whether or not I'm going to end up decluttering this, which is why I'm kind of mentioning it, because I might end up decluttering it, but honestly, I've been keeping a hold on to this because it's just the color story makes me so happy. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find, like, dupes for these, and then if I can find dupes in my collection, then I can declutter it. But I just love this palette. Like, I think out of all the color stories from JStar, this is probably my favorite because it's a little bit more unique. Like, yeah, it's not my typical, like, bright, insane eyeshadows, but for me, this is happiness, and it makes me very, very happy. That being said, if you know any dupes for the shades in this palette, let me know, because I'm down to declutter this if I can find some dupes, because it's just not a palette that I reach for because of the fact that it's JStar. And, you know, if you I'm not gonna, like, harp on you if you enjoy JStar's products. Like, whatever. You do you. It's not my place to judge. But I just don't want people to come after me, if I'm being completely honest. And honestly, the stuff he does is shady, so I'm kind of fine with decluttering most of my stuff from him. But this palette, I need dupes, y'all. So if y'all can find dupes for these eyeshadows, let me know, because I'm in love. Thank you guys so much for watching this declutter video. If you enjoyed, make sure you subscribe, comment down below any videos you'd like to see me do. Go follow my Instagram and TikTok, make by TashaXO, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.